Sure. All right, so first off, I just wanted to wish everyone a very happy Black History Month. We made it to February, and January is now behind us. Right now, I want to honor the fact that we are standing on 3 tribes' land. Actually, we're standing on Cowlitz land, we are standing on Clackamas land, and we are standing on Kalapuya land. I recommend that all of you go and research the history behind these tribes. They're actually quite fascinating histories, and there's a lot to learn from them about the history of how Lake Oswego became Lake Oswego. So I just wanted to take a moment to honor them and thank them. And thank you all for being here.
Thank you, Sophia, for the land acknowledgement. It's our goal to be a little more inclusive as we continue to do our work. It's our goal to recognize our history and knowing where we stand and where we are here in Lake Oswego. Knowing the history is really helpful for us. And so you'll be getting more and more as we go along. Let us ground ourselves now as we begin our evening with our mission statement, our agreements, and our expected outcomes for the evening. I'm going to go over all of them. Our mission is to educate and empower Lake Oswego residents and others, and the institutions with tools to combat racism in all its forms and make Lake Oswego and Oregon a better place to live for residents of all races and ethnicities. Our agreements for the night, we ask that you speak from your own experiences. That means using I statements. Don't generalize, please, and don't tell someone else's story. Listen and with full presence, curiosity, and openness to other perspectives. Ask clarifying questions, assume the best intent, lean in when it gets a little uncomfortable, and challenge biases. Oops, ouch. We may stimulate pain in ourselves and others, but please take care of yourself. Step up, step back. Speak up if you intend to hold back, and we ask that you listen more if you tend to talk a lot. Our expected outcomes for the evening, we'll get acquainted with who is in the room and wanting to respond to racism in Lake Oswego. We won't solve racism in 2 hours. You'll leave the meeting with more questions than you came with. You'll have one actionable item. Well, I hope you will come out with one actionable item that you have identified for yourself that you can do. And you'll have more ideas on how you can interrupt racism. So as I look out at this beautiful group, I want to do a little check-in. So put a thumbs up if you are doing great, a thumb sideways if it's so-so, and if this is a bad day, put it down. So let's check in. All right. I see a lot of thumbs up. I see some to the side, and some, I guess, they're down. We're here, and however we bring ourselves tonight, we just ask that you try to be present throughout the evening. Do we have any newcomers tonight? Raise your hand if you're a newcomer. Okay. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome. And so this is Black History Month. And first of all, I want to give a shout out to Catherine Phelps because prior to this general community meeting, Catherine does a story time. And it's interesting because what we thought would be like about a half an hour program has now morphed into almost an hour. And what we thought would be a once a month program, now the request has come in that they want to have story time every week. It is awesome, awesome, awesome. Catherine, I want to give you just a shout out and a hallelujah shout there for those who know about those. A hallelujah shout because she is doing it. She did a wonderful job with her guest reader tonight, talking about Black history for our kids, giving them a good lesson of how Black History Month started, or the Black History Week, or just recognizing it, and just taking us through the whole little stories about it, and to give them a teaser about the next month already, because we're excited. And if you have children, grandchildren, um, check in next month. We have a young engineer who's also written books, who's local. So come out and check out story time. I have to admit, I'm going to give you my apology, because after listening to the students tonight and Catherine, I said, "Oh, Willie, get over it." Because I used to say, "Well, I don't want to just celebrate in February. We want Black history as history, and that's 12 months a year, and we want to have it 12 months." So I would not embrace, I'm telling you my truth, I would not embrace Black History Month, but I'm doing better, and I have come to grips with it and realized that it's a time that someone spent a lot of hours, days, months coming together to honor Black history, first for a week and then for a month. And now I'm asking you to honor Black history every day of the year. And we will have special activities during February. Now, just thinking, someone said it was February. I don't know who in the beginning. We're only 1 month into the year, and we've had good times and not so good times. I know that I don't want to revisit it, but if you turn on news stories, they're still talking about it all day long, every day, about the horror and tragedy of the attack on our nation's capital by domestic terrorists. And that part is troubling. But I have to say, we had joys too this year. Shortly after this, not that many days after this horrible thing happened in Washington, something actually beautiful happened in Washington, something that we can celebrate, because on January 20th, it was historic. We had Joe Biden, who was sworn in as president, but the historic piece of it was Kamala Harris became the vice president. She is the first woman to hold that office. She is the first Black Southeast Asian woman to hold. And I want to say yes, 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 yes. Do my little shout. Okay, I'll be careful and not fall off the chair here. But I want us to just embrace it. And then it was a beautiful ceremony. And then it ended with such a beautiful poem written by Amanda Gorham. And we're going to share it again tonight. just to get us grounded. Thank you, John.
President, Dr. Biden, Madam Vice President, Mr. Emhoff, Americans, and the world. When day comes, we ask ourselves, where can we find light in this never-ending shade? The loss we carry, a sea we must wade. We braved the belly of the beast. We've learned that quiet isn't always peace. And the norms and notions of what just is isn't always just is. And yet the dawn is ours before we knew it. Somehow we do it. Somehow we've weathered and witnessed a nation that isn't broken. It's simply unfinished. We, the successors of the country in the time, were a skinny Black girl descended from slaves and raised by a single mother to dream of becoming president, only to find herself reciting for one. And yes, we are far from polished, far from pristine, but that doesn't mean we are striving to form a union that is perfect. We are striving to forge a union with purpose, to compose a country committed to all cultures, colors, characters, and conditions of man. And so we lift our gaze not to what stands between us, but what stands before us. We close the divide because we know to put our future first. We must first put our differences aside. We lay down our arms so we can reach out our arms to one another. We seek harm to none and harmony for all. Let the globe, if nothing else, say this is true. That even as we grieve, we grew, that even as we hurt, we hoped, that even as we tired, we tried, that we'll forever be tied together, victorious, not because we will never again know defeat, because we will never again sow division. Scripture tells us to envision that everyone shall sit under their own vine and fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid. If we're to live up to our own time, then victory won't lie in the blade, but in all the bridges we've made. That is the promise to blade, the hill we climb, if only we dare it. Because being American is more than a pride we inherit. It's the past we step into and how we repair it. We've seen a force that would shatter a nation rather than share it. Would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated. In this truth, in this faith we trust, for while we have our eyes on the future, history has its eyes on us. This is the era of just redemption. We feared deception. We did not feel prepared to be the heirs of such a terrifying hour, but within it we found the power to author a new chapter, to offer hope and laughter to ourselves. So while once we asked, how can we possibly prevail over catastrophe? Now we assert, how could catastrophe possibly prevail over us? We will not march back to what was, but move to what shall be, a country that is bruised but whole, benevolent but bold, fierce and free. We will not be turned around or interrupted by intimidation, because we know our inaction and inertia will be the inheritance of the next generation. Our blunders become their burdens. But one thing is certain: if we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright. So let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left. With every breath from our lungs, pounded chest, we will raise this wounded world into a wondrous one. We will rise from the gold of the West. We will rise rise from the windswept northeast, where our forefathers first realized revolution. We will rise from the lake wind cities of the Midwestern states. We will rise from the sun-baked south. We will rebuild, reconcile, and recover in every known nook of our nation, in every corner called our country, our people diverse and beautiful will emerge battered and beautiful. When day comes, we step out of the shade, aflame and unafraid. The new dawn blooms as we free it. For there was always light, if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Wow, she's really talented, and she has given us our marching orders for the year, for many years. So when you feel down, go find a YouTube channel with her poem and just play it, play it, and just listen to the words. It's really, I mean, I don't even know what to say, except that it sort of makes me feel so proud. Okay, I've been talking and talking, and I'm not going to do that. We have some more work to do tonight, but I want to continue to give some shout outs to people. I mentioned Catherine before. I'll mention her again in this one. But we had the MLK Day meditation, a silent meditation walk that was sponsored by our Youth Empowerment Committee. And Liv, I want to give you a big shout out and all the others that helped you with it. And to John, who never ceases to surprise me. We've been using a megaphone out there or trying to shout, and John has put together a nice microphone for us to use out in the park. So thank you, John. And Kathy Lloyd, who, again, is working. She's a teacher in the district. She's a great supporter. She's pushing for Black Lives Matter. She's the lead person, I think, there for the school district. She and Teresa working together with trying to bring a committee of community people and students to plan Black Lives Matter activities. And they have put together a website, and it's really filled with great material. So if you have access to any of those links, take a look. You might learn something. I wanted to also thank Ada. She's going to come on soon, but Ada led our session last month, and the eye of the storm, but looking at how biases and how deep and how quickly and how ugly they are when we start unleashing them and looking. And so we're going to bring Ada back again for a part 2, I hope. I'm saying it as I'm saying it, I hope. She's going to come back for a part 2 of that and follow up to talk some more and have some more conversations about the biases that we have and how deep they can run and how, now these are my words, how ugly they can make us act towards one another, and just some education to understand why we do these things. Everybody has biases, so it's not like we don't have something, but you have to be able to have some kind of control, recognize when they're way out of whack, and put them in check. I want to thank last month's facilitators. We had some students then, but we're going to have some other students tonight. So I welcome the students here. I want to thank the meeting monitors. We have people who have been trained to go to different meetings and monitor the meetings. And we had people that monitored the city council meetings. and also the City Council goal setting retreat. And we appreciate that very much. House Bill 2001 and 2003, about our housing and what have you there, they were there. Um, Thank you to all who donated during the course of 2020. If you donated and you sent your money through the church, by now you probably have gotten a letter, and thank you again for all of your help. Thank you for the financial donations. Thank you for time and that you've put in and to help us. And I would be less than whatever if I didn't say a special thank you to our leadership team and our planning teams. Both of you have worked tirelessly, and I appreciate you so much. We're few in numbers, but we work almost around the clock, it seems, at times. So thank you very much. And now, at last, Ada, I'm going to pass the mic to you.
Thank you, Willie. Right on time. I want to repeat. I want to just repeat some of the words that Amanda Foreman said. She said, "Let us leave behind a country better than the one we were left with." And really, that's why I'm here, and that's why we're all here. It's in an effort to provide a better country and a better future for our children, for my children, for your children, for all our children. And so, I just wanted to say that. And I want to thank everyone. Every month we ask you to take an action, to choose one or two actions to do. And Willie did say earlier, one actionable item. I think that to build this country that we want, some of us are going to have to dig deeper and do more than just one action. So do more. And if you would not mind sharing in the chat some of the actions that you did from what we asked you. Last month, we asked you to read CAST. We'll circulate the link. CAST is Elo Reads Book of the Year, and we'll circulate the link to the Elo Reads events. So if you've read that, please share in the chat. Continue the conversation of America's caste system. Reach out to BIPOC-led equity groups and ask how you can support them and how you can be involved and follow through. And then also, if you attended any MLK Day events, please share with us in the chat. And if there's anything that you did that I haven't listed, please share in the chat. We're going to make some time at one of these future meetings to talk more about the actions that you're taking. We just want to appreciate you and to take note of that. And so I'm going to turn it back to you, Willie, to introduce our speaker.
Okay, here I am. You were fast there. Tonight, we are honored to have Toya Fick as our guest speaker. She is going to give you an overview of how racism looks here in Oregon and 3 ways to address racism in the Oregon public schools and anything else she wants to share with you. Toya Fick is executive director of Stand for Children, Oregon, and the board chair of the Maya Memorial Trust. She has used these roles to create important new opportunities for students, educators, and community members alike. As one of the primary authors of Ballot Measure 98 and a leader who played a pivotal role in the historic Student Success Act, Toya strives to ensure Oregon schools are equitable for all. Toya's determination to help students succeed is rooted in her own upbringing. She overcame tremendous obstacles growing up in a small town in Louisiana and becoming the first member of her extended family to graduate from college. Through her experience as a middle school teacher in Baton Rouge and in Washington, D.C., she also saw firsthand how bad policies negatively impact the classroom, and drew from those experiences as an education policy staffer for former Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, and then an advocate with the Alliance for Excellence in Education. Before joining Stanford Children and Meyer Memorial Trust, Toya also worked in government relations for the Oregon Health and Science University. Despite the impact she is having, the attention her work is generating, Toya is still focused on the most important role in her life. She's the mother to two incredible young children who attend Oregon public schools. Toya, thank you for being with us tonight, and it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Can someone just give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Just make sure you can hear me. Perfect. I have been told today that my other system isn't working, so I'm gonna wear my headsets to make sure that y'all can hear me when I move. So as the opening speaker said, we made it through January. It was touch and go there for a minute. I'm super excited that that is behind us. I'm actually glad we all saw that. I sat glued to the coverage for hours on the 6th, texting with friends and family and folks I know who live in DC, who work in the Capitol, who are stuck in their offices. And the thing that I appreciated the most about the coverage is, while I was watching, I think it was CNN, I can't remember who, I just heard a lot of white announcers say things that I was thinking, like, oh, let's flash a picture of when the Black Lives Matter protests were there. Or, oh, I think if these folks were Black, they would have gotten different treatment, right? Usually it's just me saying that out loud to my family and my girlfriends, and seeing it on TV from folks who don't look like me was just like, oh, now y'all see it. And hopefully y'all can't unsee it, right? And let's work together to make that not the case moving forward. I am honored to be here today on the first day of Black History Month. As I put in the chat, Black history is American history. And so let's make sure that we don't continue to separate this other history as if it's just certain people's history. And one thing I saw today on Facebook that actually made me think, which doesn't happen very often, is that as kids, I just remember being taught that, slaves were brought to this continent. And someone posted, no, people didn't bring slaves here. They brought architects and scientists and doctors and mamas and sons and daughters and fathers and grandmas and made them slaves, right? Just even that paradigm shift sort of changed that whole framing for me just today alone. So this was an amazing conversation to sort of kick off Black History Month, if you will. I'm going to start sharing my screen here. Hopefully you can see the first slide here. Again, I'm honored to be here. I got a text from a friend like 10 minutes ago saying, thanks for coming to help solve racism in the suburbs. So that's not going to happen tonight. It is an honor to just have this conversation with you all. I want to make it a conversation. There'll be points in the in my presentation here where I will ask you to throw things in the chat so that folks can engage with each other a little bit. My goal is to have a deeper understanding of each other and of how racism plays out in our lives, to commit to stretch ourselves, because this is hard. This is hard for me. And I feel like I've lived a life where I had to deal with racism since I came out of the womb, given where I grew up and when I grew up. And it's still really hard. And the other thing I want to sort of have us commit to tonight is to stand up when you see things that don't quite feel right, because chances are it's not right. We don't have to have a PhD in racism to know when something feels weird. And sometimes that's all those of us who are on the receiving end of it need, is for someone to say, oh, I saw that, and I'm going to say something about it. So those are the things I want to commit to tonight. So as I was talking to the facilitators for this conversation, I talked a lot about how I thought my upbringing prepared me for all the kinds of racism that one can face. And so I thought, let's start with who I am as a person. These photos are from when I was 5 and 9. And I picked these photos for a couple of reasons. First, being 5 years old, starting school is like this the space for every child when you're taken from your family's cocoon and into this system of adults and other people you don't know. And so the process by which that happens and what happens when you get there, do you feel like you belong? Do your teachers see you as a whole person? That really does imprint on you. And so that system is where I work now. And I really want to talk in a bit about what we're doing to make sure that system is one that sees kids and honors them. I chose this photo of me at 9, well, because it was one of the few I could find, but at 9 years old, I was bused to schools that were not in my neighborhood. And I didn't realize until not long ago how different this is from a lot of people's upbringing. But my little hometown made the New York Times multiple times as a child because there were people literally standing in the way of busing. This news article that I clipped that I found a couple days ago talks about a judge who decided to take 3 little white girls and make them a ward of his court so that they wouldn't have to be bused to non-white schools. His name was Richard E. Lee. He's a descendant of Robert E. Lee. It's not a coincidence that the school I was bused to is off of Jeff Davis Road, which, you know, if you know Confederate history, Jeff Davis was the president of the Confederacy. I grew up in a place where people were not subversive about their racism. In fact, at 9, when I was in 3rd grade, I was the only Black kid in my class, and I was not allowed to be friends with the kids in my class outside of school because their parents didn't want me to be friends with them. I was from literally the other side of the tracks, and they were not excited to have someone who came from that part of town, who was Black, who was poor, in the same class as their kids. And I don't know why, but when I got off the bus every day, I went to my class and all the other Black kids went somewhere else. I wasn't the only Black kid in the school, just the only Black kid in my class for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grades. It was insanity. To feel isolated, to be alone. I needed to have teachers who saw me. Otherwise, I have no idea how I would have gotten to this place as a fully formed adult. I could tell you stories from my childhood, and I sometimes share them with my children that make them think, how did you get through all of that? And I now look back and think, oh, that was, you know, experience that helped to shape who I am and shape how I deal with racism. And still, when I got to Portland, I was just like floored and unprepared for this situation we call the Pacific Northwest. I'll just say briefly, I moved here very pregnant with my daughter, who's now 10. And I was here less than a month before she was due when I was walking around my neighborhood and happened upon a garage sale. And I just tell the story as like my first awakening to something being a little off about how racism shows up here. So I go to this garage sale and I'm standing there with my purse. I'm looking through the racks and whatnot. And this white woman with her friend walks up to me, and I'm about 8 months pregnant. She grabs my handbag off my shoulder and takes it off my arm and walks over to the woman selling the stuff at the garage sale. And I'm standing there very pregnant, don't want to chase her. Don't want to, you know, cause her to do anything that will harm me physically, but I'm yelling, hey, that's my purse. Hey, lady, like, what's going on here? And she gets to the woman who's selling the stuff at the garage sale and says, how much is this? How much for this? I want this bag. And the woman goes, who's now, I now know her as my neighbor. She says, that actually belongs to the woman you just took it from. It's not mine. It's not for sale. It's hers. So the woman comes over and she goes, oh, and just kind of throws me back my handbag and walks away. And I'm like, whoa, right? And I realized not long ago that the way I felt in that moment, like a couple questions kept going through my mind. Did anybody else see that? Does anybody else understand why that's racist and horrible? Can anybody else help me? Right? I'm often in rooms where I'm the only person of color, most likely the only Black person, one of the few women, and one of the youngest people in the room. And often stuff will happen, and I'm like asking myself these very same questions. And more often than not, the answer to those questions is no. Like, there's nobody that can sort of just like look over and go, did you? Yeah, okay, well, what are we gonna do? Right? I can't tell you how isolating that is. And I can't imagine how young people who didn't have all the craziness I had as a child in terms of my upbringing to prepare me for the fact that people might be a little bit racist, right? And I don't mean everybody, like someone said earlier, we all have biases, right? And so I don't mean this is just a one race of people's problem, but I can't tell you how often this happens. And there's no one in the room who also saw that that was a problem. There's no one near me who also saw that this is an issue. And so just sitting silently to figure out how to deal with it is fine when you're a 40-year-old, whatever, not so fine when you're 5, right? And so my work here this evening and sort of thinking about how to frame this conversation is to sort of try to do things or take steps that will turn some of these questions into a yes, right? Because we need more allies. We need more people to see the same situation and go, that's not right. Let's do something about it. And so I should start by saying thank you to all I think someone mentioned there were educators in the room. Y'all's work is impossible right now. So I just want to just pause before I go into what we're talking about here this evening. And thank you all for all the work that you do. And I'm so excited to hear from some of the students who are on this conversation tonight. So with that, in terms of really thinking about a couple of things that we're working on, and I will say that my organization does a lot of its work, the bulk of its work in the state capitol. So right now, between now and the end of June, our work will really be focused on policies and legislation and funding requests and whatnot that moves through the legislative process. And so in thinking about what we're doing there that impacts all of this, I sort of try to figure out which 3 components of our work can really start to think about how we build a better tomorrow, how we get to a place where some of the questions on my previous slide are yes when kids look around the room, where there are folks who are allies in the space with them regardless of their race, where people stand up when they see injustice. So a few other things we're working on will be in regard to hiring diverse teachers and keeping them. There's a lot of work happening in this space. We want to not only just make sure that more diverse teachers are hired in our schools, but they are kept if there are layoffs, because there are systems in place that will make that not true. We all could use some anti-bias, anti-racist training, but as our education system is largely white, and I will show you the numbers in a bit, making sure that that is a live thing that we do for our educators will be important as we move forward, because these are really hard conversations. These are conversations that need to be done with thought and care. And so making sure our teachers are trained and supported in that space is really important. And then funding for programs that support the education of Black, Indigenous, people of color, so BIPOC kids. So those are some of the things that we're working on. I'll go into a little bit more details here as we move forward. So I'll start with House Bill 2001. It is our baby. We are super excited about this particular piece of legislation to sort of answer that first question of making sure our educators who are diverse are retained if there are layoffs. Before we do that, I want to take a second to ask a question, and please do share in the chat. I'd love to have an idea from folks in the room. What grade were you in when you had your first teacher of color? I'll just take a second to get a drink of water while folks populate the grades. Seeing a lot of folks say college, 8th grade. Last 3 entrants have been college, high school. Keep going. I didn't realize again how abnormal this is, but my very first teacher was a Black woman. She, my kindergarten teacher, her name was Miss Coulter. My mom, single mom, low income. We lived in literally one of the housing projects near the school, and Miss Coulter did not care. She told my mom often that I was brilliant. She told me that I was brilliant. She told my mom that it was important for my mom to be a partner in my education. And so she talked to my mom often, which annoyed me when I was in kindergarten, because for me, talking to my mom meant I was in trouble. But to Miss Coulter, it was to make sure that my mom had the tools to be a partner along in this journey. And it set me up in a whole different way. I actually believed, I believed all the adults around me as a kid, but I absolutely believed Miss Coulter when she said I was brilliant. And so from kindergarten on, you couldn't really stop me. You couldn't really tell me that I didn't have what it took. And I didn't know until looking back how much I needed that at the start of my education to get through college. But for a lot of Oregonians, that first time wasn't until 10th, 11th, 12th grade, college, graduate school. Someone just said, I have a fifth grader, and she is yet to have a teacher of color in public schools. And she didn't even realize that until I started working on this bill. Right. It's not something people sort of always think about, except for when you sort of want to look around the room and go, did anybody else? Right. Um, so we are, one of the things I realized when the pandemic started is when uh, really thinking about the impact of the COVID-19 on budgets, thinking about layoffs was one of the first things that we were really, really worried about. And so before I get into that, let me just tell you about this picture. Um, I didn't realize how pervasive it is to have mostly white educators as you're going through the system until I started visiting schools as the executive director in this role. The last time I can't, every time I'm in a school, the Black children just kind of stare at me like, who is this lady? What is she doing here? We don't see very many people who look like her around. She clearly is a professional. Our principal, sometimes our superintendent are talking to her. What's going on here, right? And I just started to notice that more and more as I visited schools. In fact, if you read our little editorial in the Oregonian, this picture might make sense to you. But if you didn't, this picture was taken in 2017 when Governor Brown asked us to go down to Eugene and be with her for a signing ceremony for ballot measure 98. And before the ceremony, I was talking to all these legislators and teachers and principal of the school, and Governor Brown was about to come in. And I'm standing like almost center stage, and this kid comes out of the audience. I'm in a high school. I've never been to this high school before. Kid comes out of the audience and asked me to take a selfie with him. I'm like, oh, the governor's coming. Like, she's right here. Like, what, people like, why Toya? And so we take a little selfie, and he goes and sits down. And my colleagues are like, do you know him? Why did he ask you? I'm like, it's because we're both Black. And that's not normal for him to see a Black person who is important on the stage in front of him. Right. And he knew enough to know that was different and that was special. And he somehow wanted to capture it. I've never seen the photo, and I'm sure it's not that great. But it was just a reminder of how few educators of color there are in our schools and the impact that could have on our kiddos. We know, though, that there's reams of data that show us that our kids, when they see themselves reflected in their educators, they do better, they have better outcomes. But it's also true, and I'm not going to read all this to you, I'm happy to send this slide deck, that having a teacher of color also is critical for white students because it helps them sort of be in proximity to someone who might be different from their family and then have a different viewpoint of different races and ethnicities because they have a trusting adult in their life who doesn't reflect their race, right? The more we see one another, the more we talk to one another, the more we understand one another, the more these sort of barriers sort of break down. So it's not just for the kids of color, it's for all kids. Sadly, in our schools, the the reflection of the kids is not sort of seen in our educators quite yet. There's been a lot of efforts these last few years to make those numbers better. Right now, statewide, about 40% of our kids are kids of color, and that number is growing. About 10% of our educators are educators of color. That number is not growing as fast as we like. So we want to definitely make sure that we're holding on to the folks who are coming in to teach our babies. In Lake Oswego, that number looks more like 29% kids of color to 5% teachers of color. And I just took this data just yesterday from your state report card for the school district. There are districts where 40% of the kids are kids of color and 5% of the educators are educators of color. That imbalance is not abnormal. And again, there's a lot of work happening to close those gaps, to make those numbers sort of wave at each other. We have been, as a state, aware of this for a long time and have done things like pass the Minority Teacher Act in 1991. We passed the Educator Equity Act in 2015, all to say, hey, we need more educators of color. Let's put more time and resources into it. However, our state laws say that the last teachers in have to be the first ones laid off if there are budget cuts. So if there are budget cuts this year, the last teachers hired, even if half of them are teachers of color, according to our state laws, will be the first ones laid off. So our bill, 2001, asked the legislature to tell the districts to maintain their ratios. If you have to lay folks off, let's find a different way. We have to maintain our ratios. They're not high enough to make sure that there are people of color in our buildings to help make sure that, you know, some of these disparities start to disappear. So that's one of the things we're doing to support more teachers of color coming in, but keep them in our classrooms once they're there, if there are unfortunate situations like layoffs or furloughs or anything like that. So again, number one is looking at making sure our educator diversity reflects our kiddos, but we also definitely need training for system leaders and for educators, because folks have to create spaces that allow all of our students to feel like they belong in the classroom. So just another way to sort of engage in this conversation. Can anybody tell me if they have seen this photo before? And if so, what is this photo of? Give me a thumbs up if anyone has seen this picture in the news. And if so, anybody know what's going on here? So this is a screenshot from a school board meeting in, I want to say June or July, in Salem Kaiser. So here in Oregon, there was a school board member who showed up with a photo of Cliff Robinson from the Blazers. I think he's from the Blazers. For an hour and a half in front of his face while he talked to his colleagues. When he took down the picture, he was pretty much in blackface. He had a really big black mask on. And his point was, he didn't like Zoom meetings because you don't really know who's on the other end of the conversation. There were 45 other ways he could have done that. But instead, he chose to basically show up in blackface for an hour and a half, and no one said a word about it. No one said, oh, what are you doing? And why did you choose that photo? And what's going on here? And what are you trying to say? Right? Not because they didn't think it was wrong or because there was something off about it, but because really didn't have the tools, the training, the words to say, hey, cut it out. Let's have a conversation about this. Needless to say, we're going to be working on changing the dynamics and the people around the table at the school board in Salem Kaiser. But this was in Oregon. This was recently. It made national news. And it just sort of speaks to the idea of really making sure that our educators and school leaders have the training and support for being able to say and call out and create spaces that are safe for people to engage when foolery happens, right? And so there are a couple of pieces of legislation. I won't list these all. Again, we'll share this PowerPoint that folks are working on in the Senate mainly, but those efforts will move to the House too, to help make sure folks have the training and support and tools and reference points they need to teach anti-racist curriculum, to make sure that there's more inclusive education opportunities out there for folks, but really to understand what's going on in that picture. That is appalling to me. And it happened here in our state, and it happened very recently. This was not a long time ago. This was within COVID, right? And so we need to make sure our educators are prepared for things that they see in their classrooms to support their kiddos, to teach anti-racism, and to teach an anti-racist curriculum. So we'll be working to support these efforts as well. And then lastly, because I'm going to be out of time here, want to make sure that we touch really briefly, and thank you, yes, Senator Frederick and Senator Wagner for introducing that piece of legislation. Want to make sure I call out here, the third point is really focusing on equity, focusing and funding equity. I just put this up in the PowerPoint. I saw this last week. Colt Gill, who runs the Department of Education, a couple of days after the graduation rates came out, had an op-ed in the Oregonian that just said very clearly, when we focus on excellence and equity, that drives up graduation rates. We need a lot more of that in our schools, right? We can't just give money and hope for the best. We actually have to focus and make sure our educators and districts are focusing on equity, because those things drive up outcomes for kiddos. There are a couple ways to do that. I won't get too far into the weeds, but suffice it to say, there's a lot of the resources going to our K-12 schools. Most of it is going out through the state school fund. Some of it's going out through these very clear measures that say equity matters. Equity is important. Do what needs to be done for your kids of color in your schools. And that's what is happening with the money on this side of the dollar. As you can see, that's very little compared to the big state school fund source of resources. So all we're going to be asking for this session, what we're looking for, is to make sure that resources actually go to opportunities and supports for kids of color throughout the school district, whether it's in the state school fund or in those set aside accounts. I just wanted to put up the organizations we work with, because many of them are in the metro area. And I heard earlier someone asked, like, look for organizations that serve kids of color. They're all over the state. There are at least 50 organizations that we know personally who work directly with Latinx kids, with Black kids, with immigrant students, with Native families throughout the state to help support students in their journey to be successful in our schools and beyond. And I'm happy to provide a comprehensive list of organizations, because we don't serve directly any particular group of students. We serve kids throughout the state, but there are plenty of organizations, many of whom have been clamoring to get inside schools to help support kiddos. Because there aren't very many educators of color, because there are many kids facing issues that they, don't necessarily have the tools and supports inside their buildings to take care of. And I just wanted to make sure that you all see that list here, and we'll be sending it around. I am short on time, so I'm going to skip this video until afterwards, but I just want to say again that it is an honor and a privilege to be with you all this afternoon. I know there will be a couple of breakout sessions, and I have a little time on the back end, so I'll come back and start with a little bit of a video to sort of close out my remarks. But thank you so much for your attention and for your time, and I'm happy to cede the floor back to Miss Willie. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I think you're muted, Miss Willie.
Okay. Actually, I'm not the one, and I'm not sure. Ada, are you doing this piece? Or Pat?
Yeah, I think we're going to go into breakout rooms. John is going to send us into breakout rooms in a minute. Thank you so much, Toya, for those words. Wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, you've left us with lots of potential action items to cogitate on. So we're grateful to you. John, are we ready for breakout rooms?
Yeah, if somebody wants to go over the questions, then I'll go send us out into breakout rooms.
Okay, thank you. Pat, happy to go over the questions. So we're going to ask you to review 2 questions, and we'll put them in the chat box as well. So when you're in the breakout room, please share a time where you felt othered. What was your feeling? What did that feel like? A personal story, please. And don't feel that you have to share anything that's too painful, but please do share. And everything that's in the breakout room is not being recorded. So that's a very private space. Then the second question is, how can we be allies in the quest of a more racially just society? So 2 questions. Thank you, John. See you all when we come back.
Perfect. Thank you, Pat.
And I would add, anybody who doesn't want to share, would prefer to share in the chat box, we encourage you to do that also.
So are we sharing stories, like short group stories here in the large group now?
Yes, and I would say if people are sharing the stories that you share your story. And like from my group, we didn't get too far into the second question. So if people wanted to respond to that second question in the chat, that'd be great too, since we ran out of time. Thank you.
Also, can I add, if you have any questions for Toya, please put them in the chat so she can look them over.
I'll share for my group since folks seem real quiet tonight. If that's okay. Great, thanks, Toya. So we had a group of quite a few educators in our little circle. People definitely shared their experiences of being othered, and it was really heartfelt, and we were supportive and grateful that folks wanted to share that way. But the takeaway was just to know that it's okay, to get comfortable being uncomfortable. We were reminded of that as a group. And the biggest thing that we took out of it was that it's so important to really listen when someone is telling you that something is happening to them. And that we've heard this before, but we must remember it and remind ourselves and not come with judgment when people speak to us about their lived experiences, that we just must listen to them and respect what they have to say and not try and change their story because it's their story. And so we want to remember to remind ourselves of that practice. That was a big takeaway from my terrific group.
I can share something. I realized in our group that pretty much everybody has had the experience of being othered, but what I really learned from the group was we had a Black gentleman in our group, and I realized how extremely deep runs the injustice in our society against Black people. Because he said the picture that's on your license, on your driver's license, is sent to the insurance company when an accident occurs. And if you have a Black face, they will give you less money for your car damage. They will make all kinds of adjustments to say you don't get what a white person would get. It's quite amazing to me how deep runs the discrimination in our society.
I guess I'll go next for our group. Sorry about the background noise. I'm doing my best to control it. Anyways, one thing I learned is that from others in my group is that when we have conversations about serious and taboo things, it makes us better allies. That's and it's really like important to have these conversations so we can learn when to be upstanders. And that's how somebody answered the second question, and I thought it was really insightful.
I like what you just said, Sarah, so eloquently, that I actually tried to say in my group, which is that when people shared their experiences, it helped sort of build my toolbox or my lenses, anyway, you say it a lot better, but it gave me better experiences from which to be an ally, from which to grow, from which to share with others. Hey, this is another way that we're racist in this society. So every time I listen, I'm able to sort of spread the word, be a better ally. Everything Sarah just said is exactly how I felt for my group.
I really enjoyed the group that I was with tonight, and I appreciate everyone's vulnerability in telling their othering story. And I think one takeaway we had was just that educating ourselves as much as possible to do the work of being an ally for others. I really appreciate everyone's and the ways in which people are educating themselves on a daily basis to become better allies.
In our group, people were the things that we had in common were just how isolating it was for everybody in each of our own experiences, no matter what they were, to be othered. And also, when we were othered in these different scenarios, how a lot of times, you know, it was just out of the blue, on the spot, and you don't know how to respond. And because you don't go walking down the street with your papers on this is how you respond to this kind of a scenario. And it's not till, you know, in hindsight, that thing where you go, oh, I wish I would have said this kind of a thing, you know, and how frustrating that can be too.
Yes, I'd like to say, first of all, thanks to Sarah, one of our youth who facilitated our group. She did a great job. And one of the suggestions as far as being an ally, I had mentioned many situations and being in meetings and making a recommendation to solve a problem and that type of thing, and to be completely ignored. But when a white person repeated the exact same things that I said, it was looked upon as being a great idea with a lot of fanfare and encouragement, and that person was given, you know, typically given the lead to lead that effort. And so what I was encouraging people to do when you're in situations like that and you see that, speak up and say, hey, wait a minute. Denise just said that, or Ada just said that, or Pat just said that. That's not your idea. They need to lead this effort, and let's not ignore her as if she didn't say that. So that's a good way to be an ally and to stop normalizing that type of behavior in meetings and those type of settings.
So to touch on that, Denise, and also on what was said just a moment before by Jan, what was brought up in my group briefly, but I thought it was kind of a thing that seems obvious that we don't really talk about, is that when these sort of situations arise, like the Zoom meeting that Ms. Fick presented about earlier in the meeting, you don't need to have like a whole speech prepared. I think it's just incredibly important that you speak up in that moment, even if it's just to point out like, hey, that's not okay, let's talk about that. Like, you don't need to be, you just need to be the person to start the discussion. So I think that's something that's really great to bring up, is that people look at it as this big daunting task, when in reality, it's just a small action that you need to do.
So true.
Exactly.
So true. Go on, Sophia.
Oh no, I don't want to interrupt you. I can absolutely go after.
I insist that you go now.
Okay. One of the things, this has actually come up in some discussions outside of this group as well, but if someone, particularly a person of color, shares a story with you where they have experienced racism or they have experienced discrimination, reacting with the words, oh my gosh, I can't believe you experienced that, or just outright shock, and then proceeding to question them or gaslight them about that experience, isn't helpful at all. You might be shocked that that sort of event or that level of racism has occurred, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they have not been aware of that for the entirety of their lives. And it's quite frustrating to have to explain to yet another white person, yes, racism exists. Yes, people experience it. Yes, even in a position where you might feel like, you know, there's no racism in Portland or there's no racism in Lake Oswego, it's still something that happens. So responding with something along the lines of, oh my gosh, I can't believe that happened, and then questioning them about the validity of that experience is completely counterproductive.
Thank you, Sophia. That is so true too. I have to say, when I participate in meetings like this, in groups like this, and the question is, you know, share an incident, the problem I'm having is I'm scrolling through pages of incidents and trying to decide which one to share, because there's so many. There's so many. So yes, you're right, because the white person will say, is it true? But there's so many. Any person of color that you encounter will have plenty to choose from. I did just want to say one thing, that everything that Toya has said, when you are othered, when you feel that you don't belong, it affects the quality of your contribution. It affects the quality of your work. You hold back. Like we saw this in the video that we watched last week, actually. You hold back, you don't perform at your best. You don't perform at your best and you're holding back. And then what happens is that really when I talk about all of our children benefiting from a better America, is that when my children don't perform at their best, your children don't know what their best can be, because they don't have the advantage of our best. So it's a win-win. Getting rid of racism and creating a better world, it's a win-win. Thanks, Toya, again.
Absolutely. I'm so enjoying this. I think we only have a few minutes left. So I wanted to take a minute to play just a super short video from a program that we did a couple of months ago, and then come back on the flip side. I've never shared a video before on Zoom, so I'm just praying this will work. So let me sort of see if I can set this up. And okay, give me a thumbs up when you hear sound that's not my actual voice right now.
It's very, very light.
Oh
sound.
no, the sound is light. Okay, give me
Turn on original sound.
Say it again.
When you share sound, when you share, there'll be a little button in the lower left that says share sound through your computer or something like that. If you check that, it'll work.
Oh dear God, you think I just learned Zoom yesterday? Optimize video clip, share sound. Oh, yay. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay, just learned something. I want to read an excerpt from a scrapbook of a Black student who graduated from high school just a few years ago. Here's what this bright student said. Graduating this year on time is so important to me because I'll be the first in my family to accomplish this. My mother wasn't able to finish high school on time and get her diploma, so I know how much me getting mine means to her. To have my entire family expecting me to graduate and to set a good example for the younger ones is one of the biggest responsibilities I've ever had. But I refuse to let anyone down, regardless of the amount of pressure I have on my shoulders. I want to be the one who finally breaks the cycle of my family's educational history. I want to be the one to finally make a difference. I want to be the one that everyone can look up to with smiles on their faces, telling me how proud they are. The one that they can finally say, you did it too. I want that to be me, Breonna Shaquille Taylor. So I shared that on Facebook maybe 2 months ago, just the words. And my mom was the first person to call me and she said, why are you sharing stuff about how you felt when you graduated from high school? I said, that wasn't from me. That was from Breonna Taylor's high school yearbook. And I shared that because I think it spoke to all of my hopes and dreams as I was in the same space and time in my life, and from so many students that we talk to in the work that I do. And it just reminds me of how important it is to do a couple of things. One, see the humanity in the people around you, right? I don't think anybody gets out of bed every day hoping to screw up or hoping to make a huge mistake or hoping to not be successful in what they have planned to do that day, right? So it just is really important to just take a minute and see what's going on with folks. Two, I heard someone say this earlier. It's important to be the echo if there's something happening be the first to jump in and say what's going on here, right? Someone said you don't have to have a prepared speech. I don't walk around prepared speeches. I just use clips from other speeches I've given, right? Like I'm not always ready to say, okay, this is a problem, what's going on? And take a 10-minute soliloquy about why. But sometimes just calling it out is enough to start the conversation. I will say, like a couple of years ago, I was in a meeting where, again, I was the only person of color in the room. And I happened to be in a situation where everybody else was against this idea that we've worked so hard to get across the finish line. And at the end of the meeting, one of the legislators came to me and she said, I wasn't a good ally to you, and I'm sorry. So I'm going to stop this meeting and apologize to you in front of everybody because we were all attacking the things that you all wanted to do for kids. And it was actually getting ballot measure 98 through the legislative session, right? It's, you don't always have to be prepared to fix the situation, but again, just calling it out and showing the person you saw it and you understood, and asking how you can help is sometimes just the only place to start. So yeah, I just wanted to leave you all with that. I saw a few other questions in the chat. I will be sharing all the bills. I think there was a list of bills that were presented in the chat, of what we're working on. Our website is stand.org/Oregon. There'll be plenty of ways to engage. One of them will happen tomorrow about a bill I didn't mention in my list, but I'll just take a second to mention it now. It's Senate Bill 422. It eliminates fines and fees for youth who get caught up in our justice system. You will probably be surprised to know that depending on your race and which county you are in, the jurisdiction will give you fines and fees for things like making photocopies, for psych evaluations, for your court-appointed attorney, for transportation of witnesses, right? And again, those fees are disproportionately levied on people of color, low-income people in our state right now. That's Senate Bill 422 that will be heard tomorrow in the Senate Judiciary Committee, and we're just asking that those fines and fees be eliminated because families who receive them are least able to pay for them, and they're kind of ridiculous anyway. So again, those are ways that we are sort of chipping at the system to make it more just for Oregonians who, may have darker skin, who may be lower income, but who are unfairly burdened by our system in so many different ways. So I will stop there, and just say thank you all for allowing me to pretend to be in Lake Oswego with you all tonight. I really appreciate the engagement and the attention and the time. And I'm super easy to find for follow-up questions, especially for our students and educators who are on the Zoom. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll be on mute for the rest of the time. I won't bother you again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Toya. A little Zoom applause for Toya Fick. Thank you for joining us. And also, thank you. I want to call out a thank you to our facilitators. Thank you for being here tonight and helping facilitate in the break rooms, and especially to our 6 youth who were facilitating: Liv, Sophia, Sarah, Julia, Jaden, and Karuna. Thank you so much for being here. Little applause for them too. You guys are great. We are going to the portion of our program where we do a little short poll. It is anonymous and it helps us with our programming. So please, please fill it out. It really helps us. John is going to set that up for us right now. Thank you.
We just have a few announcements tonight. Bruce Poinsett, if you could go over the first couple announcements that is happening this week with schools.
Sure. Yeah, some of you know this is Black Lives Matter in Schools Week, which is recognized February 1st through the 5th. So I think we have you can go, well, if you want to follow the national movement for that, you can do that at blacklivesmatter@school.com. And then we're doing an event on Wednesday okay, that's up now. Yeah, so we're doing an event on our Instagram, which you can follow at respond_to_racism, which is what would it look like if Black Lives Mattered in LO schools? And it's featuring responses from current and former Black students from Lake Oswego School District. So yeah, that's happening at Wednesday at 7. And then we also have, not this week, but yeah, we have on the 14th, we have a student letter or anti-racism letter writing workshop, which is going to be facilitated by the Lake Ridge High School Students Demand Action, Equity Council, and Gay Straight Alliance. And Respond to Racism volunteers will also be providing proofreading support for students who are working on letters or other anti-racism related writing from 2:30 to 5. So basically kind of like a little office hours situation. So if you are a student on here or a parent who has students who might be interested in these events, yeah, you can register, and I'm sure we have the links for you.
Want me to do mine?
Yep, and just note that all of this will be sent, all this information will be sent to you in the next couple of days so you can have access to the links. Yep, so go ahead, Terry.
Okay, couple things. The city is doing a neighborhood character survey, and the deadline to submit your survey is February 7th, and I hope that each of you will go to the site. You'll be sent that tomorrow. It might be in the chat, I'm not sure. One of the things about the survey that you'll find is that we'll ask you how you feel about different characteristics in your neighborhood, what the houses look like, the trees, density, things like that. And I guess just keep in mind that we want the city to implement House Bill 2001 and 2003 and add more housing that can be more affordable and help make our community more diverse. And so how you answer those questions in the survey may or may not give the city what it needs to look at our city differently and make it more, help to make it more diverse. Okay, CAST. A lot of you are reading CAST, that's our LO Reads book. There are so many events this month. There's music and stories and discussion groups, and Bruce and I are leading a discussion with the library of the movie, the documentary, I Am Not Your Negro. That's on Friday. You need to, if you haven't seen it, you need to watch it before you come to the, well, it's best if you watch it before you come to the discussion group. And you can watch it for free on Canopy, which is a library. You can, with your library card, you can access Canopy and watch it. Okay, let's see. There's Lake Oswego School District positions open. We encourage you to check those out. There's positions open on the Budget Committee, on the school board, and on other board appointed committees. And you'll get all of the links in the email that comes tomorrow. We hope that you will order your Respond to Racism t-shirts and Black Lives Matter Stand Up LO yard signs, and the form to order that will come out in the email tomorrow. And then There are 2 resources available. There's the Racial Equity Support Line, where it's a support line that's staffed by people who have lived experience of racism, and they offer support. And then there's also the DOJ hotline where you can call to report bias incidents or hate crimes. And we encourage people to do that. We want there to be accurate data and statistics on bias incidents and hate crimes. So reporting it is one way to shine the light on that. Thanks, Pat.
Thank you, Terry. Willie? Did we lose her?
Sorry
Is
about
Willie
that.
here? Oh.
I'll try again.
Well,
Thank you
Willie, I put your volunteer survey back at the end.
It's back there now?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're looking for volunteers. We have all kinds of things that we could use help with. And we have a volunteer survey that there'll be a link up there that Pat will send out to you. And if you want to volunteer, if you have an hour a month, we'll take it. If you have an hour a week, we'll take it. If you have an hour a day, we'll take it. We have all kinds of things that you can be doing. So it will take as much time. I shouldn't say that. I want you to have some rest. So let me be a better person articulating this than I am at following it. So it takes some time to rest. I know we have a number of people who are retired, and some of you want to enjoy your retirement. And so take some time to rest and carve out a little bit for respond to racism if you can. We'll appreciate it. And if it's stuff that you can just do at home, well, we're all at home right now. So they'll be all at home things. Let us know. And if you have any real technical skills, if you are tech savvy and want to give us some time, we'll take that as well. I'm of the age that I sort of missed that boat when it sailed. So I'm trying to catch up as much as I can. And again, thank you, Toya, for sharing your story. Thank you for being here with us. We're so happy to have you in the area. And I look forward to seeing and hearing more of Toya. Okay, so let us leave tonight. Be safe. Stay safe. Practice social distancing. And really, really take care of yourself. These are tough times right now. And it's not a joke. I can't get funny about it. It's serious times. And I ask that you take care of yourself and have a good evening. Thank you again. Look forward to seeing you next month. Okay.
Thank you.
Take care, Willie.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone. Thank you and good night.
Pat, thank you, Edna. Thank you.